Here in San Francisco, they are quietly trying to add money back to the police budget because they...
Fuck yeah, they are, because all those smash and grabs. What the hell's going on with that? You can't even go to Macy's anymore without like getting robbed.
Yeah. This was,
They're
I
just
was
like,
trying to explain this to some people on Twitter. It's gotten to the point where places on Market Street are locking their doors in broad daylight when they're open.
bro,
But they
that
have to
we're
lock
doing
the
too
door
much.
because they don't want people running in and grabbing shit. And they also have to be able to escort you out because they literally just have people push the door open, grab whatever they can, and then run out to a getaway car or to the BART station, and they're long gone. And then you still have customers, so you don't have time to call the police because then you're filling out a police report. You know, there goes the rest of your day.
It takes you longer to fill out the police report than it does to actually try to even catch the person. I mean, first of all, you're not going to get punched in the head over a bunch of purses. You got me fucked up if you think that would even make sense. Second of all, some places, if you even chase them, you could get fired. I don't know what some weird rule is. Like, you're not even supposed to chase them, harass them, or like throw them to the ground or anything, because then you can be charged with assaulting the person. So it's all kinds of weirdness. But that smash and grab nonsense is out of control, bro. Like you can't just have like people just running up in stores like that and just smashing a window, bugging out with hammers. Like you got 75 people just running through the mall, making everybody just look nuts and crazy. Like that's absolute foolishness. So that defund the police, I mean, they pumped the brakes on that like pronto.
Yeah. And I
so
mean,
I'm sure they're going to start.
Was very interesting because they explicitly did this with the purpose of cutting police headcount, because they had this weird utopian idea that if we, cut all of this money from the police budget, specifically cut police headcount, but we're going to, have all these new services that we're going to spend this money on, and it's going to be so great and everything. It takes like 10 years for that. First of all, assuming you execute it correctly, it still takes 10 years for the dividends of those societal investments to show up. And you know what I mean?
And nobody takes money away from the police. Nobody takes money away from the police. They've got more money than God. So let's not act like they're not standing on the sidewalk shaking a can like the Salvation Army. I mean, they get funding. And I think Biden is even promising to like double the funding, because he is definitely not for defunding the police. And I don't think most Democrats are for defunding the police, because they're going to be the first ones to call the cops when somebody walks through their neighborhoods too. Like, what do you think? They don't live in the same private neighborhoods and exclusive neighborhoods that the Republicans live in? Who are we kidding? Half these people's kids all go to the same schools, and they share apartments with each other, and they're in the same fraternities. So let's not forget for a minute that after the day ends, when they do their hustle and tussle of I'm against you, you're against me from 9 to 6, they walk outside and they go meet each other for dinner and meet each other at country clubs and see each other at parent-teacher meetings. So the whole thing to me is just bullshit at this point.
Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of Americans are like, yeah, maybe the police don't need like 10 drones. Maybe you can get away with just one. Maybe you don't need 100 helicopters. Maybe you just need 50. Like certain things, especially like the military grade equipment, like that kind of scares people. But like they don't want to see the police defunded to the point where you're cutting headcount and shit like that.
Nobody wants that. And as clearly demonstrated by the smash and grabs in San Francisco, and by the fact that the homeless population has absolutely taken over the subways and any areas that have covering in New York. I mean, you've seen the tent cities in LA. It's an entire city. And San Diego has absolutely exploded with the homeless population. I mean, I did not even the last time I went to the Gaslamp District, which is the downtown area of San Diego, I genuinely thought I was lost. Like I thought I did not find the gas lamp and confused it with some other area. Because this other area, which turned out to be the Gaslamp District, was so overrun with homeless people, we barely even left the hotel.
Wow.
It is bordering on looking like downtown LA.
Wow.
You cannot walk one block without walking past 10 homeless people.
Wow. It makes sense. It's warmer. That makes sense. I mean, it's bad down here too. Or up here, I guess, in relation to San Diego. And what's interesting to me is like our shelters, at least in San Francisco, our shelters are not actually full. The shelters don't allow you to do drugs in the shelters.
Right.
So the assumption is that, there's just so many homeless people and the shelters are 100% full 100% of the time. That is not the case.
Right. No, it's not the case. There's a lot of mental illness. I mean, you can't just shove people into shelters without giving them counselors, treatment. There's mental illness. I mean, you're just taking random people from off the street with all these different problems, all these different traumas, and just shoving them into bunk beds in a building. I mean, of course, that's not going to work. You're putting schizophrenics next to people with mental illness, with people who have been sexually assaulted, with people with their children, and you're just putting them in rooms together without treatment, without counseling, and without support.
And a lot of these people don't even want to get clean.
Well, because getting clean, where do you even begin or end with getting clean? I mean, people make it sound like getting clean. Yeah, well, getting clean is the first step. What happens after that? How do you get a job? How do you explain where you've been for the last 10 years? How do you get a job that you can afford a place to live? How do you get a job that you can afford a place to live and not rely on the same circles you've been in that got you jammed up in the first place, right? So you need a whole new network. You need an education if you don't have one. You need counseling if you have mental illness or if you are experiencing trauma of some kind. You're still dealing with substance abuse. You're just not using anymore. You're trying to find a place to live. You might not be living with people who are conducive to your sobriety and your mental health. And then you're working for minimum wage and you can't even afford to live anywhere because everything costs, $2,000.
That's the interesting thing. Like there's more homeless services in the more expensive cities because they have a larger tax basis. However,
but the divide is wider in those areas too.
Right. And that's what I'm saying. Like the divide is not as wide in the places where someone could maybe afford to split a place with someone else if they're both bagging groceries in the middle of like, Idaho or Iowa or Pennsylvania, you know what I mean? Rural Alabama, there are a handful of places where, you might have to work 2 jobs, but yeah, you can afford to live on your own or split, some shit or whatever. But those places where you can do that
have a lot less resources.
Those places don't have the resources.
Right.
So you'd have to like give people the training and the treatment or whatever, and then line them up a job via, I don't know, Zoom interviews or whatever at Safeway or Food Lion in South Carolina or some shit, and then ship them there. Right. It would take a lot more coordination and a lot better execution than what we have right now.
Absolutely. So it's a complicated issue, which obviously no one's going to solve. We're certainly not going to solve it here tonight. But I think one of the things we can do the next time you and I get together on our East Coast, West Coast chat is talk about some of the wealth and poverty lessons that we learned from Robert Reich's class when we went to UC Berkeley. For those of us who don't know who Robert Reich is, I didn't know him before Berkeley. He actually is an economist who worked with 4, I believe, different presidential administrations. Mm-hmm. And so because of that, has a very colored and I think cultured and experiential expression of how he views wealth and poverty in the United States and the factors that contribute to it. So we'll save that for another time.
People call him, just because he's a Democrat, people call him a communist, socialist, right? No, he believes in capitalism. He just believes in, putting the right.
Yeah, he believes in capitalism with some regulation and with some honesty. I mean, basically in a nutshell, he's like, I don't think there should be people starving to death and that don't have water in the wealthiest country in the world. I mean, that just doesn't make sense morally or ethically, or it really shouldn't make sense legally either. And a nation that prides itself on being religious and being in touch with God, it seems like every time we have an opportunity to demonstrate it, we don't take it.
It's a very good point.
It's like the weirdest thing.
Former Clinton administration Secretary of Labor, among other things as well. So we should definitely have a conversation about that.